Hello everyone, I just want to say before we get into this that this was recorded and written before Joe Blackburn's sort of address to his state of the game. The state of mind I was in when I was writing this and the state of mind I'm in now is definitely different. Future's, looking kind of bright, so thanks for listening. Enjoy the video, but just know it's a little more negative than I think probably community sentiment is at now. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. Do you remember the first time you loaded into a game of Crucible? Did you have a good time? Was it fun? I can remember my first legendary weapon from all the way back in Destiny 1. I can remember my first exotic too. I can even remember my thought process as I chose Warlock, Hunter as my first class. But I can't remember that first game. I don't know what map it was. I don't remember what loadout I used. I don't even remember if I won or not. But what I do know is from that moment on, I was in. Destiny's PvP had its hooks in me and wasn't letting go. Even though it most certainly tried. I might take breaks here and there, but every time I would come back and load up the Crucible, I would be hooked all over again. At least until recently, that is. Now when I load up a game of Crucible, I either play a few games and get bored, or try out a few new guns and loadouts if I'm doing particularly well. But no matter what, I log off with a feeling of, what was the point of that? There's just something so hollow about playing PvP these days. Burnout is certainly a factor. I've basically played this game non-stop for years at this point, the majority of that time being spent in the Crucible. But there is something deeper. Something that's been there for longer, that I think was just obscured by the veneer of addicting gameplay. As time has passed, this issue has gotten harder and harder to ignore. Really, it's a combination of things, and I imagine I'm not alone in feeling them. I like to go over them in this video, and break down how I've gotten to this point. Let me know if you have felt similarly, or differently, in the comments. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the video. What is the purpose of Destiny 2's PvP? You could ask 10 different people and likely get 4 or 5 different answers. To the casuals, the Crucible may seem like an extraneous game mode that's sole purpose is to farm for loot and gear. To a more involved Crucible player, it's a fun place to hang out with friends or use your guns against targets that truly fight back. To a more competitive player, it's a place to prove your dominance and skill. However, the fact that I could come up with 3 different answers off the top of my head should be concerning. To me, that shows a lack of vision and focus as to what kind of place the Crucible is. Is it a place to hang out with friends and use your guns against other players? Is it a place to show your skill and mastery? Is it a place to get loot and gear? The answer to all of these is yes. It's all of them, at the same time. That's a bit of an issue because not all of these visions or ideas about the Crucible are compatible with each other. The crowd that likes to relax and hang out with friends will inevitably get annoyed or frustrated by the crowd that wants to try their best to win or do well, while the people who are trying to do well get annoyed that others don't seem to be doing the same. The crowd that just wants loot is annoyed with both because they are roadblocks towards said loot. It creates a vicious cycle, with one side blaming the other. Really, this is an issue caused by Bungie. Without clear direction on what the Crucible is, or should be, they let people assume what it is, while in reality it's a jack of all trades, master of none. For me personally, I tended to fall into the skill and mastery camp. This led to me being incredibly unsatisfied with the game, where it would feel so close to being something great at times, only to regress into something very unfun and difficult to play. Personally, I think this stems from the fact that there is a very reachable skill ceiling in the game, or at least at a certain point you're so close to it that only the slimmest of improvements can be made. However, making those improvements feels unnecessary, because the only thing to gain is more skill. What I'm trying to say is that at a certain point, there is no reason to get better. It's not going to help you reach max competitive rank, because by that point you've probably already gotten there. It's not going to help you go flawless, because at that point you can likely do it solo. Skill has a soft cap in this game, and to push past that soft cap is a very frustrating, very empty journey. This ties back into the incentives to play, because at a certain point you run out of them, so you have to create your own. Unfortunately, you'll likely hit a point where you can't come up with anything else. At that point, what even is the point of playing? For me, I started to make gameplay videos, not because I really wanted to show off how good I was, but more so to give me something to do, to give me a reason to continue playing and improving. This all relates to the lack of clear direction and vision in the Crucible. By keeping PvP in the state that it's in, Bungie can semi-please everyone, but they won't be satisfied, and will inevitably wash out to play other games. By giving a clear identity to the Crucible, I feel that Bungie could better set expectations of those playing it. You could certainly make the argument that they already have, or at least are trying. The competitive playlists and trials certainly seem like the place to try your hardest and show off your skill, but the reality is, what point is there to playing once you've gone flawless, gotten your God Roll Adept weapon, or hit max competitive rank? What seems to be misunderstood is that the players who are going to try their hardest in these modes, for the longest, aren't going to do it for free. Even a leaderboard of some sort, or removing the competitive rank cap will be a good step towards giving these playlists more of an identity. Because right now, everything feels sort of the same, but just slightly different. and that's a great way to burn players out. Why do I play PvP? It's a question that has been on my mind more and more recently, but also something I've grappled with continuously in the past. Usually, I would come up with an answer to satisfy myself. Some of those answers have been, I'm having fun, I want to get better, I want this gun or emblem or title, or I want to try out this build. All of these were incentives for me to play the game. What would my current answer be? I would honestly struggle to find one. Destiny's Crucible currently has an issue with a lack of incentives, a lack of reason to play. Like a lot of others, I'm a rewards-driven player. I have less free time to play, so I want that playtime to be meaningful. That's not to say that there aren't rewards or goals for playing in the Crucible. The issue is that those rewards and goals are so easily attained for the experienced player that they are basically meaningless. They're not made for them, which ends up with them feeling more like participation trophies rather than a reward for completing a milestone or challenge. I would make the argument that most people who play the PvP in this game have some sort of ego. It might not be big, but it's still there. I know it's there for me. It's the reason players get frustrated when they lose a gunfight or a game. I'm not trying to say that this is a bad thing, honestly it's quite the contrary. That ego is what pushes players to play and improve, because for all of those people who you've beaten, or who aren't as good as you, or who haven't achieved what you've achieved, there are just as many who are still better than you, or who will beat you. Rising to face that challenge and triumph over them, that's the competitive spirit that drives people to take the game seriously. One of the best ways to do that in a game is to have an accomplishment or some sort of marker that is visible to other players that says, I'm better than you, or I've done what you can't. That may sound mean, or egotistical, or toxic, but it's the truth. That desire to show off, to flaunt your skill, is something that the majority of hardcore competitive players have. Right now, most of those markers for showing off your skill and dedication are achieved by doing basically the bare minimum. Competitive rank is basically meaningless since once you've reached the cap, you're the same as all the others. Going flawless on trials, also just the basic structure of the mode. There are no achievements or goals for players who go beyond that, or who even want to go beyond that. There's just a wall, and that's the issue with the rewards. You're earning the same thing that everyone else has, and if they were able to achieve that, then what reason is there for you to continue to play or improve? Why get better when you've already effectively reached the top? I think most players could accept that the rewards for the Crucible are lackluster if there was a different way to show off. But the reality is, where we are now is a regression from where we used to be. Think back to Forsaken, where there were 2 weapons that could be earned for play the competitive playlist. Even before that, we had weapon rewards for climbing the ranked ladder. These were things that not every player could get, and if you saw someone with them, you knew they put in the effort. If you see someone with an Ascendant emblem, what is the thought? Are you looking at the culmination of time and effort? Possibly, at least until you look at the rest of the lobby and see 3 other people with the same emblem. So while it may be an achievement for some, for others it might just be business as usual. Like I said before, it's not a reward for your collective effort and time. It's a participation trophy saying you finished. For the hardcore player, a participation trophy isn't going to cut it. This cuts at a deeper issue in the game currently. That's the idea that everyone should be able to complete or obtain everything, and anything that may be out of reach for the average player will have less impactful rewards. This is why there is only an emblem for reaching Ascendant rank in comp, and why the weapon rewards for the competitive playlist are merely for playing games, not winning. Bungie doesn't want to create a scenario where only the best players have the best guns. However, I believe that we have reached a point where there are so many good weapons that are obtainable for the average player that sticking some nice weapons behind a difficult challenge isn't that much of an issue. Even just removing the weekly limit for the competitive weapon drop when playing at Ascendant rank would be a good change. A healthy change even. But because things like this aren't addressed or even acknowledged, the player base feels abandoned. Like Bungie doesn't even care about PvP, when in reality they obviously do care. They care enough to buff and nerf things based on PvP performance. It might be slower than people would like, but it still happens. However, when the most exciting thing to look forward to for PvP is that something overpowered is being nerfed and a new map is coming, it's hard not to feel like the redheaded stepchild. While rewards and incentives are certainly lacking, the fundamental gameplay can become extremely frustrating at times. The biggest factor in this is how bad dying feels. I can't pinpoint exactly one issue in particular as the cause, as I think it's a combination of issues. However, I do believe that there is one seemingly easy fix that could be made that would drastically improve the experience as a whole. But let's start at the ground floor of what makes dying feel bad. First is the intangibles. Things outside of your control that affect your ability to participate in a gunfight. Dying in a one-on-one gunfight generally doesn't feel too bad, especially if you miss a shot or two. You have something you can learn, something to improve upon, a mistake to rectify. But dying in a gunfight where the person either lags a bit and skips around, or maybe one of your shots doesn't register, feels really bad. The kind of death that makes you want to yell. It's a death that is out of your control, and the only way you could have come out alive is by not engaging at all. There's nothing to learn, and the only thing gained is frustration. The second would be abilities. Dying to an ability has a tendency to feel very frustrating. How many times have you gotten plinked by a hunter's throwing knife and killed? Or slid around a corner only to get launched into the air by a Void Warlock's melee? Or shot a few times and then meleeed from a mile away by a Striker Titan? Or any of the other numerous ways the abilities can completely turn a winning situation around. I know I have had all of these things happen to me, usually multiple times per game, and it's incredibly frustrating. It feels like your individual skill is completely invalidated because someone pushed a button. However, on the flip side, doing these things to another person has a tendency to feel really good. It's a spike of power that can completely turn the tables in your favor. So it's this double-edged sword, where one side may feel really good at the cost of the other side feeling incredibly bad. Weirdly enough, this is one of the core aspects of Destiny's gameplay that I feel makes it so addicting. Those spikes of power where you get to feel unstoppable. It's something that very few other games can generate, and removing this would fundamentally make Destiny a different game. Finally is the respawn timer. I think this is the biggest reason that dying in the Crucible can feel awful. The current respawn timer is 7 seconds. That means when you lose that gunfight or you get solo supered, you're waiting 7 whole seconds to get back in the game. On paper that may not seem like a lot, but this is what 7 seconds feels like. That's how long you're waiting every single time you die. On top of that, there's the extra few seconds after you respawn that you can't move. If you're having a bad game or aren't very skilled at the game, you're going to be seeing that a lot, to the point where you might feel like you're looking at the death screen more than you're actually playing. It's no surprise that most casual players or PvE players prefer Mayhem and the other alternative game modes for their Crucible experience. Not only do they get the power spikes more frequently, if they die it's no big deal. They're back in the fight in a literal second. The effect that the respawn timer has is incredibly far-reaching, and I believe hinders the enjoyment of everyone who plays PvP. A shortening of the respawn timer would, in my opinion, drastically improve a lot of the player experience in the Crucible. The issue with abilities suddenly becomes much less if you're back in the game in a couple of seconds. Losing a gunfight to lag will still feel bad, but would shortly be pushed out of your mind by returning to the game. The potential for fun would increase dramatically as players spend more time playing and less time watching. It's not very enjoyable to watch everyone else have fun while you feel left out. And right now, I feel like the respawn timer kind of creates a situation like that. I love the PvP in this game. I also love the time I've spent playing PvP. I wouldn't consider it wasted time, but going forward, that's certainly how it's going to feel. Destiny 2's PvP is very weird that way. Where other games have a tendency to keep people hooked in and playing, disregarding some serious upset or issue, Destiny seems to push people out after a certain point. Eventually, they will have had enough. Those things that were fun to do 500 hours ago don't feel quite as fun. Things that may have been major sources of enjoyment now just feel frustrating. Guns start to feel the same, with the only exceptions being exotics, but even then, that glamour fades too. I think this is due to the fact that a lot of Destiny's PvP is built on novelty. The way guns feel to shoot, the way you move through the environment, the abilities, it's all novelty. Once all of that loses its luster, the game starts to feel hollow. For a lot of people currently, I think that's the stage that they're at. Maybe what I'm describing is burnout, which could very much be the case and is definitely a factor. However, I would argue that burnout is a symptom of a deeper issue, one that can't easily be summed up in a word or two. It's some core flaws with how the PvP content is produced and delivered to us, as well as the state of the current Crucible landscape. To someone who just started playing, they likely won't see the issues, but to someone who has put in the time with the Crucible, they will be very apparent. Possibly hard to describe, but their existence is clear. To sum it up as succinctly as possible, the Crucible isn't designed for the casuals or the hardcore, it's made for everyone in between. There are no rewards or incentives to keep the hardcore players playing in the long term, and the people who just started playing have no incentive to play more than a few games a week. Ultimately, the biggest reason to play is fun. Fun is subjective, of course, but I would say that everyone who has invested serious time into the Crucible started to do so because they were having fun, and had the desire to play more. What happens when that fun runs out though? You need some other hook to keep players playing, a carrot to dangle in front of them, otherwise they will find the next source of fun. Look at any other popular shooter for an example of this hook. The majority use a ranked grind. Look at Apex Legends, Overwatch, CSGO, all games that have a relatively healthy ranked scene regardless of the individual player's opinions. All games that let you advertise that rank to show off your skill. Destiny also has a competitive game mode, but that's all it is, a game mode. Perhaps the better term would be activity. There is a cap to the rank and a reward for reaching that cap. There is nothing else. Once you've gotten that emblem, you've essentially beaten the mode. The one thing that prevents it from being a complete ghost town is the season weapon reward that you can get 3 times per week. But that's only 9 games you need to play if you want the weapon. What if you don't want the weapon? That's a dead playlist to you now. Would having a true ranked system save PvP? No, definitely not. Because high competition is not something that is very fun in Destiny. Honestly, it's stifling. The reason why a tournament at GCX works is because it's a yearly thing, and they mix the hardcore players with the less skilled. If that tournament was just all of the best players trying their hardest to win, I think the interest would quickly die out, both in competitors and viewership. I mean, look at any other Destiny tournament throughout the year. There is no easy fix to Destiny 2's PvP. Honestly, there may be no fix at all, but there are some improvements that could be made, and things that could be done. However, there is a bright side. That is, despite community sentiment, PvP still gets changes. It still gets attention from the dev team, despite how your favorite streamer or YouTuber might frame it. Granted, it's not a lot, but it's still some, which is more than some other games can say. The biggest issues with these changes is just that. They're changes. PvP has changed a lot in the past few years, but how much could you say it has improved? I would argue very little. That's what a lot of people take issue with. Bungie can shuffle the deck as many times as they want, but it's still the same cards in the deck. If PvP will ever improve, it needs to start with actual improvements to the Crucible experience. I'm not a game developer, so I can't say for certain what those improvements will be, but I can say that at the very least, we need a crystal clear vision of what Bungie wants PvP to be, because right now, I don't think anyone knows.